My mother is a dragon. She got pregnant out of wedlock and gave birth to a little phoenix like me. As for my father, unknown. The Dragon King uncles were left baffled after ruling out the Phoenix clan. Isn't mom amazing? These genes are the most impressive in all the realms. Based on this alone, I've been searching for my father for 1,000 years. On the day I was born, the sea was churning with towering waves. The 4 Dragon Kings were all gathered outside my mother's palace, pacing around. The East Sea's azure dragon's face was flushed red. The West Sea's black dragon was stomping his feet in pain. The South Sea's red dragon was muttering endlessly. The North Sea's white dragon had a headache from all the chatter, accompanied by a blaze of fire shooting into the sky. I was born. My mother excitedly cradled me and rushed out of the palace. Brothers, guess what I've birthed? The East Sea Dragon King frowned, secretly thinking, oh no, it's a dragon. What else could it be? The West Sea Dragon King, while rubbing his foot, peeked into my mother's arms. My mother tossed me into the air. I soared upward. It's a bird. Didn't expect that, did you? Watching from below, the 4 dragons' eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. Terrified, I fluttered, flapping my undeveloped wings. That is truly something only my own mother would do. Clearly, the Dragon Kings did not believe my mother. Having been spoiled by her 4 brothers since childhood, she was a real troublemaker. She had smashed Grand Supreme Elderly Lord's pill furnace, stolen fairy peaches from the flat peach garden, and plucked out the feathers of the morning sun immortal to make a feathered duster. She even climbed the tree of destiny and snipped the marriage thread of the young demon lord undergoing his tribulation, causing him to fail his trial and have to start it all over again. These glorious achievements served as my prenatal education. From the day she became pregnant with me, she urged me to set my sights on breaking her records. I carried a heavy burden before I was even born. To be honest, I even considered ending it all right there in her womb. My Dragon King uncles didn't lift a finger as I flailed about in the air. My mother didn't either. Somebody save this kid. If I hit the ground, I'm done for. Back when my development was still unstable, I really shouldn't have hesitated. Staying in the womb would have been so much better. My mother stood with her hands on her hips, looking incredibly smug. Have you ever seen a phoenix born in the water? This is a first in the 4 seas and 8 deserts, one for the history books. The 4 of them stared at each other, then looked in unison at my wrinkled little self. Why can't she fly? Is she deformed or something? Back when she was the young mistress of the Phoenix clan, she was so colorful. Why is this one all shriveled up? Do birds need to lick their feathers to clean them? What a hassle. Phoenixes are afraid of water. Won't she drown in no time? I rolled my eyes. My mother glared at them, reached out and scooped me up just before I made intimate contact with the ground, cradled me in her palm, and held me up before the 4 dragons. I'm a dragon, so of course the hatchling I birthed isn't afraid of water. At the sight of this, the 4 dragons crowded right in front of me, each beaming like a flower. Little one, you shouldn't listen to what was just said. I already heard it, every single word. Your uncle likes you so much. Come here and let uncle give you a hug. Nope. Don't touch this cutie. I'm afraid you'll get me killed. Our little darling is the most beautiful. You are the prettiest little phoenix your uncle has ever seen. Oh, please. You just praised the phoenix mistress for being so colorful. She's so exquisite. When she grows up, she's sure to captivate every lad in the 4 seas and 8 deserts. No, no, no. I'm deformed. I'm not worthy, himp. The Dragon Kings pestered my mother for 3 days and 3 nights. Who is her father? They were finally swept out by my mother with a broom, without ever getting an answer. My uncle's persistence definitely comes from the old Dragon King. They discussed it and headed straight for the Celestial Court. The Celestial Emperor had no choice. He summoned the Phoenix clan elders. They interrogated every single male phoenix in the clan. They didn't even spare the ones who were only 1,000 years old. They all claimed they didn't know my mother, let alone having fathered a child. So, who exactly is my father? Only my unreliable mother knows. She knows. I am my mother's. As the saying goes, a novice mother is prone to accidents when raising a child. Since we belong to different species, my mother didn't know what a phoenix eats, so she simply fed me whatever she ate. She was genuinely raising me as if I were a dragon. My Dragon King uncles were afraid she'd accidentally kill me, so they specifically hired a nanny from the Phoenix clan. But the Phoenix nanny was afraid of water, and my mother didn't want to leave the sea. So my uncles took turns going to the nanny to learn how to raise a child. For my healthy growth and to ensure I wouldn't go astray, my uncles sacrificed so much. I know deep down that my uncles truly love me. They just have sharp tongues. From then on, my mother gave up on trying. Every day after meals, she'd tell me about everyone she has offended, telling me that when I grow up, if I can win, then fight, and if I can't, then just steer clear of them. Fine, I'm still just a kid, yet I've already made so many enemies. 100 years later, I could finally shapeshift into human form at will. The first time I did, my 4 hopeless, uncles were so touched they cried for ages. My mother excitedly dressed me in a festive floral quilted jacket for the new year, and with a big smile, she said to the 4 weeping men behind her, "Look, doesn't he look just like the little child in a New Year painting?" My eldest uncle scooped me up and planted a big wet kiss on my face. My little darling is so cute. Before I could wipe off the saliva, my second uncle snatched me away and held me in his hands. "Uncle's little treasure." I pushed back with both hands. Second uncle, try to be a bit more composed. Third uncle pulled out a handkerchief to wipe my face. I looked all around. Fourth uncle was nowhere to be seen. Where is fourth uncle? He was so happy he flew off. I looked up. I sighed. It looks like there is going to be heavy snow in the mortal realm this year. My scatterbrained mother, and my 4 crybaby uncles, this family would fall apart without me. My mother said she had to find a master who was truly extraordinary for me, so that I would never be bullied by others. As it happened, the only ancient god of war in all the realms, Immortal Lord Beiling, had just returned from seclusion. He was taking a short rest in the demon realm. I don't know what my mother said to Immortal Lord Beiling, but she actually convinced someone who never took on apprentices to agree to take me, a little phoenix, as his disciple. For the past 100 years, I had always lived in the sea. I had never once set foot on land. I stood in the courtyard of Immortal Lord Beiling, looking left and right, full of wonder. "So you're the Immortal Lord's little apprentice." I clutched my little fists, feeling nervous, and cautiously looked around. Who's talking? "Little dumpling, that Immortal Lord is really harsh. Why not take me as your master instead? I'm actually very gentle." A gust of wind blew by. A youth in black robes stood with a stalk of dogtail grass in his mouth, standing in front of me with his arms crossed. On his head were a pair of fuzzy, crimson ears. He surveyed me with dark, piercing eyes. "My mother told me, the Immortal Lord is the most powerful person in all the realms. Who do you think you are?" I curled my lip and returned his gaze with the same attitude. I run this peach blossom grove." "Who do you think I am?" Instead of getting angry, he laughed. I scoffed and hurried past him on my short legs, heading straight for the cabin. The youth caught up to me in 2 strides. "Hey, little dumpling. Be my apprentice. My magic is extremely powerful." I was so startled that I scrambled away on my short leg, not paying attention to the person standing in front of the cabin. I crashed right into his straight legs. Before I could react, I was scooped up and held in one arm. The tip of my nose was filled with a cool, clean scent. I looked up. The man looked like a celestial immortal, with a serene and gentle expression. He was even better looking than my 4th uncle, who is known as the most handsome man in the 4 seas and 8 wastelands. "Ling Qi, stop causing trouble. Granduncle only has this one little girl. I am more than qualified to teach her." Ling Qi looked full of resentment after being scolded, but because Beiling's aura was too overpowering, his voice grew quieter and quieter. Beiling did not respond, but instead carried me directly into the cabin. It was only later that I learned Ling Qi's grandfather was a sworn brother of Immortal Beiling, a legendary mythic figure of the demon race. His father is the current leader of the 9-tailed fox clan, and Ling Qi is a red 9-tailed fox, a rare sight in 10,000 years. He had lived with Immortal Beiling since he was young, and although he never officially became an apprentice, he had received plenty of guidance from the Immortal. "In that case, you should call me Little Ant." No way. "If you can find me, then I'll call you that." I shrugged my shoulders, took some pastries out of the house, sat on the rattan chair at the entrance, eating and humming a little tune, with no intention of looking for him at all. By the time the sun went down, the Immortal returned from his outing, but Ling Qi was still hiding in the peach blossom forest. "Did he bully you again?" I shook my head. "He is too slow-witted. I'm not playing with him." During my time of cultivation, Ling Qi often tried to trip me up, but I simply ignored him. After a few times, he found it boring himself and stopped teasing me. 1,000 years later, I had blossomed into a stunning beauty, elegant and refined. In Ling Qi's words, I could charm over half the men in all the realms, and this half of the men naturally did not include this stinky 1,000-year-old fox. The Immortal Lord went into seclusion for a century, and I prepared to leave the peach grove for a while to find the father I had never met. On the night before my departure, Ling Qi lingered at my door for quite some time. I couldn't stand his awkward nature any longer, so I pushed the door open and asked directly, "Stinky fox, what do you want?" "Great uncle says he is worried you'll cause trouble and disgrace him, so I'm to go with you." Ling Qi leaned against the nearby pillar, his cheeks slightly flushed, his dark eyes darting away. "You're lying." I ruthlessly exposed him. "No, I'm not. You never dare look at me when you lie. And you say you aren't. I stepped closer, leaning in toward him, forcing him to look at me. His face turned even redder, like an apple ripening in autumn. Suddenly, he reached out with a long arm, grabbing my slender hand and covering my eyes with it. He muttered, "Don't look at me." His fingertips were slightly cool, bringing a touch of freshness to the warm summer breeze. I blinked, full of confusion, my long lashes brushing against his palm. "Don't move." I didn't move. The breeze was light, a faint fragrance between our lips, like a soft feather brushing past, gone in an instant. After bidding farewell to my master, Ling Qi and I headed straight to the Immortal Realm to find Old Man Yue. Old Man Yue was under the marriage tree tidying up the red threads. Seeing my sudden arrival, he quickly hid the threads away and looked at me with a chuckle. "Xia Xia is here. Why didn't you let me know in advance?" "Look, I haven't prepared a thing." The matchmaker squinted his eyes, looking incredibly kind and gentle. I pulled at the corners of my mouth, took small steps forward, and said sweetly, "Matchmaker, these peach blossom cakes are for you. I haven't seen you in such a long time, so I came to visit." The matchmaker accepted the cakes. "Is your master doing well?" "Yes, and my mother is doing well too. A while ago, she even wanted to come over for a visit." "No, no, no. Your coming alone is enough. There is no need for your mother to come." The matchmaker looked terrified and waved his hands frantically. 10,000 years ago, my mother had nearly hacked the marriage tree to pieces. A scar still remains on the trunk to this day, which is why the matchmaker fears her so much. Until now, I've had to rely on my sweet talk, bringing gifts and cleaning up his place, trying my best to earn his favor for the Dragon Clan. After all, the whole Dragon Clan still has many unmarried singles, waiting for him to tie them a good red thread. The matchmaker hadn't even swallowed his first bite of cake yet. I gave a little grin. "Matchmaker, could I trouble you with a small matter?" Hearing this, he looked up at me and at Ling Qi by my side, his gaze sweeping between us, full of astonishment. "That is not right. Haven't your marriage threads long been?" "Matchmaker, that peach blossom cake must be dry. Here is a bottle of peach blossom wine for you." Ling Qi pulled a porcelain bottle from his sleeve and offered it, and while I wasn't paying attention, gave the matchmaker a knowing look. I was left completely confused, unable to understand what the two of them were talking about. My mind set only on, how can I get news of my father from the Old Man of the Moon? What exactly happened between mother and father? What could have made my mother angry enough to hack at the marriage tree? Aside from mother, only the Old Man of the Moon himself knows the little secrets behind it. This matter, I only heard about it by chance while eavesdropping on Master. Even my uncles don't know. Back when I was born, my 4 uncles nearly turned the 3 realms upside down, but they still couldn't find father. Who could be so sacred and divine that even 4 Dragon Kings couldn't find him? I've even suspected that Master might be my father, but over these 1,000 years, I've repeatedly observed the relationship between mother and master, and I am 100% certain that Beiling is not my father. Then what kind of deity must my father be? I pulled the Old Man of the Moon to sit under the marriage tree and gave him a wink. "Old Man of the Moon, can you tell me about what happened 10,000 years ago?" The Old Man of the Moon sipped his wine and started to open up. "All right, I'll tell you then. About that battle 10,000 years ago that shook the 3 realms. I'm not interested in the war. I want to hear stories about my mother. Do you have any? Did she not tell you about herself? Why did my mother want to cut down the marriage tree?" I strongly suspect the Old Man of the Moon is just dodging the question. He knows perfectly well what I want to ask. He just doesn't want to say it. Who could know why she did that? At the time, I thought she had gone mad. If it weren't for the fact that I'm tired and need to sleep, you two should be going now. If it weren't for what, and then what happened? Why didn't she succeed? Did someone come? Was it my father? Hey, Xia Xia. Stop asking. I can't say. Why can't you say it? Is my mother threatening you? Don't worry, my mother is much more steady now. She won't do anything to you. The demon tribe has a mirror, exquisite and clear, the illusion mirror. As long as you enter the mirror while your mother is asleep, you can enter her memories. Isn't that better than asking me? After saying this, Yue Lao turned and vanished beside the tree of fate. I turned to look at Ling Qi and asked instinctively, is what he said true? The demon realm does indeed have such a mirror, but entering memories carries great risk. Those without strong cultivation will be consumed by the memories, and for the one being entered, it can also cause varying degrees of harm. Back then, even the Dragon King couldn't loosen Yue Lao's tongue. Do you really think a peach pastry will work? I pursed my lips like a deflated balloon and slumped to the ground, twisting my sleeves. You have a point. Asking others is useless. I still have to go through my mother. Is it really that important who your father is? For 1,000 years, he hasn't been there to watch you grow. He is just someone with a hollow title. Why exhaust yourself trying to find him? Ling Qi sat down beside me, his tone indifferent. After a moment of silence, he said slowly, "Look at me, I have a father. But I don't see him for centuries at a time. We are no different. A faint sorrow radiated from him, something I had never seen before. When we were young, Ling Qi was lively and restless, but now he is a dashing young man, and it has been a long time since I last saw those fuzzy red ears of his. A suffocating atmosphere began to spread, making me feel very uncomfortable. I turned my head to look at the sea of clouds in the distance, and let out a sigh. You don't understand. Seeing my despondent expression, he stood up against the light, and reached out his hand toward me. Come on, I'll take you to find your father. Even if he is in the wild lands, I will still take you to find him. I smiled and took the hand he offered. His hand was slightly cool, but my heart felt warm. East Sea Dragon Palace. I began kneading my eldest uncle's shoulders with practiced ease. Eldest uncle, please tell me, is there really not a single clue? None. Come here, Xia Xia. Youngest uncle has a clue. The North Sea Dragon King tapped his foot, lounging on the chaise longue, and beckoned me over. I ran over in a flash, looking eager to please. I received a glare from my eldest uncle. I knew my youngest uncle loved me best. Your mother had a master before. He whispered mysteriously in my ear. It couldn't be Beiling, could it? I opened my eyes wide in shock, my heart skipping a beat. Then with my mother and me. What kind of relationship is that? Youngest uncle patted my head gently and let out a scoffing laugh. What kind of wild thoughts are you having? How could that be? So what exactly was the relationship between my master and my mother? I was suddenly seized by a sense of gossip, determined to get to the bottom of it. As far as I know, youngest uncle offered a cryptic smile. He is just teasing you. He spends all day just looking in the mirror. What could he possibly know? Third uncle's voice boomed like a bell as he strode in from outside. I immediately ran toward third uncle. Third uncle, you know, don't you? Third uncle set down his wine jar, lifted me onto his shoulder with one hand and smacked his lips. Wine. Is that old man Beiling not feeding you enough? You're so light. I pouted and tried to struggle free. Third uncle, all right. I won't tease you anymore. Your mother and Beiling were fellow disciples. I'm telling you, stop looking. Aren't having 4 uncles enough for you? Exactly. Little Yin, you wouldn't abandon us just because you found your father, would you? Your youngest uncle would be bawling his eyes out. The Dragon King of the North Sea, in his flowing white robes, appeared before me in an instant, putting on a very sorrowful face. I beamed at him and quickly comforted him throughout the 4 seas and 8 wildernesses. You uncles are my favorites. My third uncle suddenly reached out and ripped the fox pendant hanging from my neck. Before I could grab it, he threw it onto the ground and barked fiercely. You brat, you've got some nerve, daring to hang around Yin Yin's neck. Ling Qi transformed into human form midair, spinning around and landing steadily on the ground. He cupped his hands, offering a respectful bow to the 3 Dragon Kings. The uncles were stunned at first, but then a cold, oppressive aura began to gather around them. I was about to explain, but Ling Qi held my hand and shook his head, whispering, "Let me handle this." What could you possibly say? Don't make a sound. Having lived with my uncles for so long, I knew their temperaments like the back of my hand. I had always seen them with happy, smiling faces since I was little. So what was going on right now? Why was the atmosphere suddenly so tense? We're all on the same side here. Terrified that the 3 uncles would attack him, I spread my arms to shield him behind me and shouted urgently, "Nobody move. Listen to me. He is." I had only said 2 words when my eldest uncle interrupted me. So Ling Qi, the young master of the 9-tailed fox clan, has also been training with Beiling. Ling Qi greets the Dragon Kings. Pardon my abrupt visit. Please do not take offense. I turned to look at Ling Qi, seeing him calm and composed. My youngest uncle spat on the ground and pulled me over to him, creating some distance. We don't care who Beiling calls what, but you and Nanan have been living and eating together in the Peach Grove. I've been wanting to beat you up for a long time. My third uncle rolled up his sleeves, as if he was about to get into a real fight. Third brother, don't be impulsive. My eldest uncle stepped down from his seat. Still, my eldest uncle is the steady one. We're all family. I watched helpless as my eldest uncle didn't say another word, and immediately struck Ling Qi with a palm blast. Ling Qi dodged, a flash of shock crossing his eyes, but he quickly regained his composure to parry my eldest uncle's follow-up strikes. I was held back by my third uncle, completely unable to intervene. Family, you say? What have you done to Nanan? If you want to marry my Nanan, you'll have to get past me first. My second uncle appeared from out of nowhere and joined the chaotic fray. I was completely bewildered. What is even going on? I brought Ling Qi to the East Sea, thinking I could get some information about my father from my uncles. How did it suddenly turn into Ling Qi wanting to marry me? How did it all of a sudden turn into him wanting to marry me? Besides, when did I ever say I wanted to marry him? My third uncle covered my eyes with his large hand. Don't be afraid, Nanan. With your uncles here, no one is going to trick you. What is actually going on? I never said I wanted to marry him. I shouted at the 4 people brawling in the air. The 4 of them stopped, and all looked at me. What? I just saw you 2 fighting, so I joined in. What is the situation? My eldest uncle ignored that, and looked at me instead. Do you truly not want to marry him? My youngest uncle smiled triumphantly, putting away his long whip. I told you Guogo couldn't be married off so quickly. Ling Qi stood in the distance, looking just as bewildered. Later, through the disjointed chatter of the 4 dragons, I understood the reason. Last month, the chief of the 9-tailed fox clan brought betrothal gifts to the East Sea Dragon Palace, asking for my hand in marriage on behalf of Ling Qi. They were chased away by my uncles. A few days later, Beiling arrived with gifts as well, saying he was acting as a matchmaker for the 9-tailed fox clan. He was politely shown the door by my uncles. Today, when I returned, they happened to see the man himself. Ling Qi had transformed into a pendant hanging around my neck, which filled them with immediate rage. They lost control of themselves for a moment. I calmed my uncles down and went out to find Ling Qi. I hadn't gone far before I saw Ling Qi squatting on the steps in a corner of the side hall. His head was bowed and he held a blade of foxtail grass, slowly drawing circles on the ground. Hearing movement behind him, he looked up. His eyes were filled with apology, teary and glistening, as if pearls were embedded within them. Seeing him look so pitiful, my heart softened inexplicably. In my memory, even when he was severely punished by our master, he had never shown such a wronged expression. He had fought 3 people all by himself. He might already be severely injured, forcing himself to act as if nothing were wrong. Are you hurt? He didn't answer, merely shaking his head gently. His fuzzy ears appeared, drooping on top of his head, completely listless. Are you angry? I tried to search for clues in his tear-filled eyes, but could only see his dejection. Am I not good enough? I was stunned. Am I not good enough? You are very good. Truly. To keep him from overthinking, I emphasized my tone. His long fan-like eyelashes fluttered, his gaze sincere and filled with urgency. Then why won't you marry me? I was caught off guard by his question, and for a moment I didn't know how to respond. After a long silence, he sighed, stood up and turned to walk away. I thought you understood. I was too impatient. I watched his gloomy silhouette, filled with confusion. 1,000 years of his actions flashed through my mind. He would make the pastries I loved, comb my hair into beautiful styles, take me to the mortal realm to see the lanterns, and take the blame whenever I made a mistake, suffering the punishments alongside me, and so many, many more things. Too many to even count. All those gestures that had puzzled me for so long suddenly seemed to make sense. Even that night before we left, the cool, soft touch of his lips felt so clear in my memory. Heat rose to my cheeks, burning hot, my heart fluttering in sync. I rushed forward, hugging his slender waist from behind. Ling Qi tensed up all over, took hold of my hands, and turned to look at me, eyes full of tenderness. Pretending you didn't know I liked you. Are you trying to hurt me on purpose? I was not. I was mortified. Then you? I stood on my tiptoes, raised my head, and cut him off before he could finish. Slightly cool and soft, just like the summer peach-flavored, iced, sticky rice dumplings. So tender, just as mother once said. The lips of a crescent moon person are the most delicious in the world. His pupils dilated sharply. His eyes were rimmed with red. Shock turned into deep affection. He wrapped one arm around my waist, about to deepen the kiss, when I pushed him away. Do you understand now? I looked into his eyes, smiling, my gaze drifting to his glistening lips. He broke into a grin, shaking off the gloom from moments ago, and nodded vigorously. But then, remembering something, he frowned. Since you feel the same way about me, why won't you marry me? Seeing him reach for me, I quickly took a step back. I have to find father first. My uncles are still watching. Then what about that kiss? It doesn't count. Seeing him deflate, I felt wonderful and hummed a tune as I left the palace. Ever since I kissed him, he's been like a different person. He cares for me as if I were a baby. If not for my 4 uncles watching closely, he would even try to tend to my daily needs. I admit I grew up pampered by my 4 uncles, but never to this extent. My uncles glare at him every single day, and I'm terrified that if I turn my back, they'll tear him to pieces. Yet, This fool acts as if he is provoking them, completely lacking any sense of self-awareness. He even escalates his behavior. Before my uncles completely lost their patience, I left the Dragon Palace, setting off on the journey to find my father and to save Ling Qi's fox hide. Ling Qi and I searched from the immortal realm to the demon realm, and from the demon realm to the mortal world. We even paid a visit to the underworld. 100 years passed in the blink of an eye. Only the demon tribe was left. My father couldn't be a demon, could he? Ling Qi looked troubled as well. Don't overthink it. We'll know once we take a look. We had just entered the forbidden grounds of the demon realm, but there wasn't a soul in sight. It was completely empty, which was highly irregular. Ling Qi pulled me behind him. Stay close to me. A metallic scent of blood drifted through the air. My nerves tightened. Should we just leave? A metallic scent of blood drifted through the air, even though our cultivation is high. This is still the territory of the demon race. If a conflict were to break out, it would be difficult to handle. Are you going to give up on finding your father? As I hesitated for a moment, a plume of black smoke rushed out from the side. Ling Qi struck it with a wave of his palm. The smoke instantly transformed into a man in black, falling to the ground. The man stood up, radiating a malicious aura. Who are you? How dare you trespass in our demon lands? Ling Qi shielded me and said in a low voice, we are merely here to find someone, and we mean no harm. The man let out a scoff. Our demon kin have all gone to the Dragon Palace, coming here to look for someone at a time like this. Who would believe that? Suddenly, black smoke swirled all around us. Before I could even react, Ling Qi whisked me out of the demon forbidden grounds. Back in the demon realm. Steady your heart. I clutched his sleeve, looking nervous. Ling Qi, I have to go to the Dragon Palace. The dragon race has always been peaceful. It is impossible for them to have provoked the demons. Granduncle is in seclusion. You wait for me in the Peach Blossom Grove. I will go first to see what is happening. No, if anyone is going, it is me. What would be the point of you going? The Dragon Kings cherish you like their own lives. If a conflict truly breaks out, and you fall into the hands of the demons, it will put the Dragon Kings at a disadvantage. If something happened to the Nine-Tailed Fox clan, could you just stand by and watch? In the end, he gave in. He let me hide in his sleeve, and we headed for the Dragon Palace. Before we even stepped into the Dragon Palace, we saw rows of shrimp soldiers and crab generals standing on both sides, each one looking solemn and on high alert. Furthermore, there were demons standing next to every single warrior, looking extremely arrogant. Ling Qi, something must have happened. Just as we were about to get closer, we saw a golden light shoot out from above the Dragon Palace, accompanied by a powerful gale that swept across the entire East Sea. 4 dragons stood at the 4 cardinal directions, while the demon leader Xing Jiyu laughed wildly in the center. Ha ha ha. Since the Dragon Lords refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit, then taste the power of the Demon Realm's artifacts. Xing Jiyu. The Dragon Clan doesn't have what you're looking for. Why must you force them like this? The battle was on the verge of breaking out. You say you don't have it, so that is that. If you don't hand over the Linglong Mirage, today shall be the day your entire Dragon Clan is wiped out. Big brother, there is no need to argue with him. I was just worried I wouldn't have a place to stretch my muscles. Suddenly, a 7-colored light shone from the horizon, and a pure white giant dragon descended from the sky, transforming into human form. Xing Jiyu, how dare you provoke my Dragon Clan? Are you tired of living? She had a slender figure, but her eyes were exceptionally cold and stern. Xing Jiyu put his hands away. I wondered who it was. Is that you, Princess He? I haven't seen you in a few thousand years. You've grown up so much. I tried to come out of Ling Qi's sleeve, but he pressed me back in. I sent a telepathic message to Ling Qi. It is Mother. With Mother here. The demon clan is no match for us. Do not act rashly. Hexi spat on the ground. She gripped her long sword, striking straight at Xingu's vital point. In an instant, Xingu was surrounded by the 5 of them, yet he seemed to be under no strain at all. His attacks were swift and decisive. The intensity of the thunderous power grew ever stronger. The dragon tribe possessed gentle temperaments, and the techniques they practiced lacked offensive lethality. Only Hexi was able to trade a few blows with Xingu. Moments later, the 4 were struck down to the ground by Xingu. Only Hexi remained to put up a resistance. Anxious, I rushed out from Ling Qi's sleeve, transforming into a phoenix and bolting straight for Xingu's back. Ling Qi, intent on protecting me, followed right behind. Without even turning his head, Xingu reached out and struck at me. I dodged with agility. Hexi, fearing I would be hurt, fought Xingu with all her might. I thought your magic would be stronger after following that fragrant bird. How is it you only have this much skill? My heart skipped a beat. Could the fragrant bird in Xingu's words be my father? But now was not the time to think of such things. I must defeat Xingu to save the lives of the entire dragon tribe. Although my uncles were already injured, they insisted on continuing the battle, even with Ling Qi and me joining the fray. We were no match for the fierce and seasoned Xingu. If only Master were here. Xingu unleashed a palm strike toward my mother. At that critical moment, a red light enveloped him, shattering his palm force, and launching countless crimson flames at Xingu, forcing him to retreat uncontrollably. Sheltered in Ling Qi's arms, I looked toward that red light. I saw a figure in crimson robes, his wings fluttering gracefully in the wind. A totem on his brow like a burning flame curled into his hair. His body was wreathed in a radiant halo, his posture tall and upright. With eyes cast down and lips curled, he appeared cold, distant, and noble. When he looked at Hexi, his gaze was filled with tenderness, as if the scorching flames just moments ago had not come from him at all. He leaned down slightly and reached out his hand. Did he hurt you? Divine Lord, he said he would wipe out the dragon clan. Very well. You wait here for a moment. It will be over soon. That is Xia Xia. Xihua glanced at me. His gaze didn't linger. With a wave of his hand, he cast a protective barrier around me and Ling Qi. Xingu had just dodged the flames, catching his breath when he saw the man walking slowly toward him, a cold sneer curling his lips. You incense bird, let my father go. Otherwise, as long as I, Xingu, am alive, I will slaughter the dragon clan. With a thunderous crash, Xingu was sent flying from the clouds to smash into the reef in the sea. It whipped up a violent storm and massive waves. Xihua descended from the heavens, looking down at Xingu from above. Your father Yeyu deserved his fate. And you are beyond redemption. You're nothing more than an incense bird. Xihua lifted his finger slightly, lifting him into the air, before slamming him heavily into the ground. Xingu roared in anger. Xihua, is this all the skill you have to be called an ancient god of war? Ridiculous. Enough prattle. Xihua rushed toward him at lightning speed, transforming into a ball of fire that pierced through his body in midair. The crimson bird soared into the sky, diving down to strike Xingu. I watched this scene in shock. Memories flashed through my mind of the great war told in ancient scrolls. That was the sealing by the ancient god of war Juk, the battle where the demon lord Yeyu shook the 4 seas and 8 wildernesses. A myth once thought untouchable was playing out right before my eyes. I was filled with an indescribable sense of awe. I witnessed the entire event, how he defeated Xingu with such ease, and sealed him within an ancient artifact. Xihua stepped through the light, dispelled the barrier, and headed straight for Hexi. Xihua frowned slightly, examining she. Are you hurt? She nodded and leaned into his chest, ignoring the others. You scared me to death. Why couldn't you have come sooner? Be good, let's go back. And I will treat your wounds. Don't let the child laugh at us. My mother pouted and glared at me. Without waiting for Xihua to speak, my 4 uncles hurried forward and respectfully greeted him. Divine Lord. Xihua nodded and handed the porcelain bottle in his hand to the Dragon King of the East Sea. Take this and go into seclusion for a few days to recover. Thank you, Divine Lord. The 4 of them spoke in unison as they headed back to the Dragon Palace to heal. Xihua turned to look at me and beckoned me over. I walked forward. Come here. I have something for you. Is he my father? Is he not something else? Something else doesn't even begin to cover it. He is absolutely incredible. My mother was right. He really is the most powerful father in all the realms she could have found for me. He is more than just a god. He is a living legend. The vermilion bird. My father is the vermilion bird. With just that fact alone, I can walk through any of the realms as I please. Xihua raised his hand and gently traced my brow. A faint stinging heat vanished in an instant. He said in a deep voice, Do you blame your father for not being able to accompany you? I do not. I instinctively looked at my mother. Father is a god of the heavens, with a divine duty to uphold. The vermilion bird guards the southern heavens, protecting all living things. To have such a father is my greatest honor. She smiled and said, The 2 of you are being awfully polite. We're all family here. Mother, just say what you need to say. Your father and I have no objections to your marriage with Ling Qi. Just make sure you smooth things over with your uncles. Your father and I have matters to attend to, so we must be going until we meet again. No sooner had she spoken than the red and white figures vanished from sight. I finally understood it all clearly. They are truly in love, and I am just an accident. A few days later, I was swinging on a swing in the peach grove. The more I thought about it, the more wrong it felt. Knowing who my father was didn't didn't make me the least bit happy. Instead, a feeling of frustration welled up in my chest. My father is an ancient god of war, and my mother is a goddess of the dragon clan. Yet, I am nothing at all. I suddenly felt an overwhelming amount of pressure. I looked back at Ling Qi and said pitifully, I finally understand why mother never told me who my father was. What is wrong? Are you not happy that your father is the god of the vermilion bird? Happy. The pressure is just too great. Even if I cultivate for another 10,000 years, I might still not be able to catch up to them. Don't worry, I'll be by your side. Really? I've heard that dual cultivation is the best way to improve one's power. Then let's go practice dual cultivation. I jumped off the swing and pulled him toward the house. He stopped in his tracks. We cannot. Why not? You and I aren't married yet. I will bring the betrothal gifts to the Dragon Palace tomorrow. Can't we do it today? I want to do dual cultivation. Do you still want me to live for a few more days? Of course. Then in front of your uncles, you must not mention dual cultivation again. Why? Just listen to me, and I'll practice dual cultivation with you. Fine, fine, I won't mention it again. After Beiling returned from his seclusion, seeing me feeling down, he came over to comfort me. Don't go crying just because you couldn't find your father. I did find him. Oh, Beiling sat on the meditation cushion across from me, picked up his teacup, and took an elegant sip. Then why aren't you happy? Master, you and my mother. Ahem. Don't let your imagination run wild. We were just fellow disciples. Then, I was a disciple of the ancient war god Xia Xia. What else do you want to know? I wanted to ask when Ling Qi and I get married. Will you have time to come? No, I won't go. I hate crowded, noisy events. Although that is what he said. On the day of my wedding to Ling Qi, he and my 4 uncles wept together, jointly condemning Ling Qi. I had been worried they might try to harm Ling Qi, but the elders only gave him a few stern warnings. Next objective, limitless cultivation power. Never bring shame to my father and mother. I nudged Ling Qi, who was still serving drinks. His cheeks were flushed, and his eyes were a bit hazy. I leaned toward his ear and whispered 2 words, dual cultivation.